Welcome, I'm Angie, and thanks for joining me for another Crafts at Night. Tonight's craft, I'll show you how to make your own book safe. The supplies you'll need are a book, hot glue, an X-Acto knife, felt, Mod Podge, paintbrush, and parchment paper. Take a look at your book, open it up, and decide on how many pages into the beginning of your book you want as false pages. These false pages will give your book the illusion of a real book when you know that it's not. Wink wink. You can decide on whether or not you want to use a ruler or eyeball it. As you can see, I eyeballed it. It's totally up to you how you want to cut the center of your book out. But to save on time, I use the margins that are already in place. Please be careful and take your time while you're cutting out the center. Note, your center cutout does not need to be perfect because that is the magic of felt. You can cover those imperfections up and prevent future paper cuts with felt. Now we'll start slowly cutting out the first piece. Oops! If you accidentally cut or tore a page while removing the center like I did here, it's okay. No one will know. You can place it back into place and Mod Podge it later when we get to that step. Remember to be careful when cutting out the pages. While you're cutting, just a side thought. With this video being the last craft of the week for National Library Week, and the first time that the Lake Wales Public Library has celebrated National Library Week with a week-long crafting videos on our Lake Wales Public Library YouTube channel, if you would like the Lake Wales Public Library to continue this for the next year's National Library Week celebration, let us know in the comments below or pop on by the Lake Wales Public Library. Keep cutting, you're almost there. Depending on the depth of your book, it can take some time cutting out the center. For this book, it took about an hour to cut the center out. Patience is a virtue here, or a cup of coffee, either way you want to look at it. Please be careful and take your time while you're cutting out the center. And you can set the center pages that you're cutting aside like I'm doing, because you can always use those to make your paper rose chocolate kiss flowers, some extra ones for later. Yay! You've reached the desired depth of your center. You'll want to start carefully laying the pages back into place. Now remember, no book is perfect. You'll want your book, once you fold it, to look like a well-read book. Now you'll want to grab your parchment paper, and what we'll be doing here is wrapping the front cover along with the false pages with your parchment paper. You'll want your parchment paper to be larger than your book. You want to fold along the edge of your parchment paper to make a clean line edge, and fold your parchment paper in the crease of your book. Take each flap of parchment paper on either side and wrap around the cover, including the side of your book. And you'll want to have tape handy. I'm using duct tape. I just always use duct tape. And I'm taping the parchment paper together. You want it to be secure before you start Mod Podging. Now grab your Mod Podge, and you can start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. We're almost there. Now you'll want to Mod Podge all around the edge of your closed book. Make sure it's securely closed. But first, you're gonna want to open up your pages a little bit at a time. And what I've done here is I've just randomly selected places in the cutout pages to Mod Podge, and I just sort of layered like so many in between. There again, I just eyeballed it. A helpful side note, it's also good to do this in a well-ventilated area, because I forgot how bad Mod Podge smells. For me, it smelled bad. And you'll notice that I'm also Mod Podging along the edge as I'm working my way up through the center of doing multiple pages of Mod Podge too, and securely laying them flat, making sure that even though the book will look well read, I just want to make sure that the pages are flat. And a helpful note here is while you're Mod Podging, make sure you stick with it and don't take any breaks. because apparently the Mod Podge, once you get some on it and you lay paper on top of paper, so page on top of page, it adheres together very well. So you'll want to fix it as quickly as you can, as you'll see here. Otherwise, your pages will be a little wonky. Just take your time whenever they start to stick to each other. And even if you do tear one while you're Mod Podging, that's okay. Just do a simple lay back flat and Mod Podge over top of that once you get it just how you like it. Now I'm just finishing up doing the wraparound with Mod Podge. And the good thing about the parchment paper wrapping the pages that we don't want to be Mod Podge, you can go all the way up to the parchment paper. Right along that edge. Now you'll want to put a really good thick coat of Mod Podge on, because I had to go back over because I couldn't tell which places I had missed. It was starting to dry, and now we'll speed it up and we'll do the inside of where you just cut the center out, Mod Podging the center really well, getting all those nooks and crannies. Including the very bottom of the center cutout. want to go along the top edge there of that last page where your parchment paper will be laying on top of. And right before you close it, you'll want to make sure that your parchment paper is snug there in the fold of the book right before you close it. You'll want to tuck it in right there. And carefully close. Now you'll want to place something heavy on top of your book for several hours. You can choose whatever you want or whatever you have around the house. I'm using a gallon jug of bleach. And you'll come back to this in a couple of hours once your Mod Podge has dried. Now you'll carefully peel your cover with the parchment paper off. And we'll start to felt the inside of the cutout for your book safe. And I'm using the hot glue and a pair of scissors. And what I'm doing here is I'm just laying it in, seeing where I need to cut the felt. And how much I need to trim off along the edges. And I just eyeballed it there using my finger. As the guideline to cut. And the good thing about felt is any small pieces that you're cutting off, don't waste them. Save them in a little bit to fill in any holes or gaps that you might see in the corners of your book safe. And remember, there are many ways you can lay your felt inside of your book safe. This is just one way that I chose. It was easier for me this way because my felt, I had used a scrap piece of felt to begin with, so I wanted to make sure that I used it to its full potential. Now I'm just cutting small scrap pieces to fill in any gaps that I might see the white pages there in the corner. You want it to look smooth. Now that you've got it just the way you like it, what I'm going to do is lay each piece out along the certain sides where I want them, so I know where to put them whenever I start hot gluing, including the small pieces. And here I'm just hot gluing the small piece to the larger piece, so it will be easier to handle when laying back into place. Because remember, hot glue is hot, so be careful. Now we're going to hot glue the base first. And really get a good amount of hot glue in the base. And make sure you have extra glue sticks on hand. As you can see, I'm just working my way around, placing the layers back into place with hot glue. Now what I'm doing is I'm checking along the very top edge where it might get a little flappy, and I'm just putting a little bead of hot glue along there and pressing the felt to the edge. Just the little finishing touches that makes it all worthwhile. Now, if you have any sharp edges where the Mod Podge was attached to your parchment paper, you can just carefully scrape those off to where they're not pokey anymore. Making sure not to cut into the paper, but just shaving those small pieces off. And there you have it. Your book safe is complete. It's an extra hidey hole for you to put any remotes or candy or anything. I have a fur baby at home and he loves my remotes, so I will definitely hide my remotes in this book. Thank you for joining me for another Crafts at Night.